You're listening to Legends of Tabletop. My name is C.P Dunphey. I'm the editor-in-chief of Gehenna Hinnom Books and the author of Planewalker. And I very much appreciate you all being here.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to speak with me today. I really, really do appreciate it. Let's see. I was so pleased after I made the announcements that we were doing this interview to see that a fellow member of the Jimquisition Chungus Chill Zone, Matthew Hudson, had proudly boasted that he also had a copy of the year's Best Body Horror 2017 anthology. Will there be an open call for more content like this anytime soon, or are you going to focus on other areas of the horror genre?
Well, we had such huge success with the body horror anthology that we're definitely going to make it a yearly thing. When that was the first call that we ever did. And, you know, as I tell a lot of authors, you know, in our correspondences, it's been the most humbling experience on the planet. You know, to start a company from scratch, you know, we opened up in April of last year, and the response that we had, the authors that submitted the stories, like, I was completely in shock and awe. And you know, the paperback and the ebook ended up doing so well that we are definitely going to do you know, another volume of it, and we're going to make it an annual thing. And you know, we're also going to have a similar anthology that's going to be the year's best cosmic horror. But we're going to be kind of moving. The whole point of this year is that we're going to be kind of pushing towards becoming a pro-paying market. Because that is our biggest goal right now. You know, we upped the pay by over 500%, and you know, every few months we're going to try and up it a little bit more until we can hit that goal. So with the year's best cosmic horror, we're definitely, you know, going to be seeking reprints. We're definitely going to be seeking you know, the best stories that we can find, but we're also going to be upping the pay, you know, exponentially, and that's the big goal of 2018.
That's wonderful to hear, because, well, just from my experience as a freelance writer, it's a little bit disheartening to see the royalties for submissions and acceptances dwindling. So, but I'm going to go ahead and address the logo that I saw on your website for the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers. Could you please share with me your experience with this organization? Is it primarily for authors and content creators, or for Gehenna Hinnom as a whole?
Well, the Great Lakes Association of Horror Writers is actually a separate entity than the company. They've been around for over 5 years now, if I remember correctly. They've been around for a while. It's a group of really great authors, you know, all from that area. They do anthologies every year. Some of them are, you know, only authors that are based in that area, and then others are going to be authors from anywhere. And you know, they always have open submission calls. As far as I'm aware, they're pro, you know, paying markets. You know, and they're a very good community. They have a great, you know, if you sign up for the membership, it's a great way to get the emails. They let you know about events that they have. They have parties. They have, you know, release gatherings. They have all kinds of readings and stuff like that. Really great support group. They actually created that logo on the website because I asked them if there was a way that I could help cross-promote. And cross-promoting is a huge thing that we like to do. It's completely and entirely essential. Because the thing about, you know, the writing community is that we are all in it together. It's not an easy path. It's not something that, you know, an everyday Joe would just be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And when you do tell average day Joes, they're like, good luck. You know, it's a very difficult thing, and the backbone of being a writer is support. And, you know, we did cross promotion with Dan Coxon of Shadow Booth, and that went really well. He had a lot of great stories. We did interviews for the authors, Sarah Reed, Paul Tremblay, Richard Thomas, a lot of really, you know, great guys and, you know, gals. So, yeah, very good to do cross-promoting. If you're ever in this kind of business, always be friendly.
Yes. It certainly cannot hurt at all? And do you anticipate another year's best transhuman science fiction anthology?
We are thinking about it. You know, the paperbacks did really well, but what we wanted to kind of do with these anthologies was to kind of not really do like a full genre, but more of a subgenre, you know, something very specific, something that's kind of popular. You know, with the release of Blade Runner 2049, you know, we just thought it'd be a good year, you know, to kind of capitalize on the interest in that and, you know, provide really great stories, which we have some fantastic stories in there. You know, but at the same time, the response wasn't exactly what we wanted. And as we're shifting, you know, originally we were sci-fi, horror, and fantasy, but it just kind of seemed to streamline more towards horror, you know, with each release that we had. And we kind of found our voice by the end of 2017, and that's why we're switching to cosmic horror and weird fiction. So, I mean, there's a possibility for it, you know, but no definitive answer yet.
Okay. Oh gosh, so you are leaning more towards cosmic horror and weird fiction in the future. When should we expect to see the open calls?
The open calls?
Yeah.
We are kind of on a timetable right now. We're developing the calendar. We're trying to set up, you know, all the covers and all the, you know, interviews, and we're going to start sending out emails to different authors for interviews that we want to do, just to kind of like organize things more. The big thing that, you know, that we're kind of like holding off on, like we released a release schedule. I don't know if you saw it, but a lot of the dates were like to be announced, to be announced, to be announced. The reason for that is because we have a couple of investors that are interested. You know, and we're writing up a proposal right now, you know, trying to provide all of the statistics and everything that we can, you know, to show that there is going to be an earning if they do invest. You know, so that's what we're really waiting for, because our biggest desire is that we have to pay these authors what they deserve. That is like, you know, the number one thing on my mind. You know, I will not continue publishing if I can't find a way to do this, because that's most important to me, because a lot of people would like to make a living off of this, and I want to be able to help them do that. So right now we have the proposal is about 98% done. All that we got to do is just make the table of contents, organize it, send it off. You know, and a lot of it looks very promising, and you know, we should have actual dates for all of the releases at the latest sometime mid-February, late February. But it's going to be looking like, I don't know, 5 or 6 open calls. The magazine's going to be bi-monthly. There's going to be the Year's Best Cosmic Horror, Year's Best Body Horror 2018. We're going to have a anthology called Lovecraft's Dreams, which is going to be all original fiction, and we definitely want to do pro-paying for that. I fell a little bit, but now that one is going to be very interesting, because we want to kind of like focus on the dream cycle of Lovecraft and have stories that originate in that mythos. And then since Arthur Machen is going into the public domain this year, we want to do a great God of Pan anthology as well. So
awesome. I definitely have someone in mind to notify of that. Oh gosh, what was I going to say? I was going to say something, and let me see. Remind all of us where we can find your content, where we can find Gehenna and Hinnom.
Okay, the website is gehennaandhinnom.wordpress.com. We are also working to get the WordPress out of there. It looks more professional. But our books should be, I know that the ebooks and paperbacks are all on Amazon. Paperbacks are on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all major distributors. We're working the kinks out to get the distribution a little bit bigger. Distribution is a very difficult thing for a small press to kind of capitalize on. It's very confusing, a lot of different, you know, numbers and you know, contracts and such. But we're looking at a few different distributors as well this year. A lot of like small press distributors that would hopefully be able to get us in a lot of brick and mortar stores, which is you know, a big deal. So really any major market that you can find, the books are going to be there.
That's very promising to hear. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit. Could you tell me about the things that you've learned while publishing Planewalker?
Things that I learned. Well, that is a very, very, very long list. The first thing, and I think the most important thing, is patience. Because, you know, I published my first book when I was 19 years old. And I was in my first year of college, I think. Yeah, about that time. And, you know, I had it edited, but I didn't have the patience. I was more concerned about getting my voice out there than the quality of what my voice would represent, you know. So I would say the patience is the most important thing. Planewalker is a very complex novel. It's not for everyone. I'm the first person to say that, but I spent 4.5 years writing it. So as you can imagine, it's very in-depth. We're coming out with a second edition of it soon. We're having it edited by David Beers, who's a very successful science fiction author. And, you know, his edits have been incredibly helpful. He's a fantastic person. He was very, you know, easy to work with as far as that. But that's the main thing, I think, as a publisher and as an author, that is very important, is how you present yourself. You have to present yourself in a professional way. And if you don't take the book seriously, the readers aren't either. You know, I also learned a great deal about marketing, lots and hours. And I remember there was a stretch where it was like 6 hours a day that I marketed that book, you know, and that's how I got to the bestseller status. It was not paid ads or anything like that. It was constant marketing, messaging blogs, messaging authors, messaging people. And even though probably 2% of the blogs and of the people actually, you know, responded, it helped. And that's the thing, is that you have to build the foundations, you know.
Yes. And you've got to be open to the possibility of showing up places that you never thought you would.
Yep.
That's been my experience anyway. But very briefly, I'm going to interject with a word from our sponsors, if that's okay with you.
It's absolutely fine. I need to jerry-rig this webcam a little bit more anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, I will step aside for a brief moment and let you know about our fine sponsors, the Small Batch Craft Coffee Roaster, Birds of Feather Coffee Company. They roast unique craft coffees in small batches, so it's always fresh. Their signature blends showcase the amazing breadth and depth of flavors that coffee has to offer. The Morning Lark blend, for instance, is a bright, complex coffee with a lot of layers, from the structured roasted malt base to the honeyed sweetness that finishes with hints of citrus and spice. It'll wake up your taste buds morning, noon, or night. Check out all of the Birds coffees and order now at www.birdscoffeecompany.com. And for a limited time, use the code LEGENDS10 at checkout for a 10% discount on your order. And don't forget to check out the Legends of Tabletop Legendary Brew, which is our special blend of coffee. And that's also available at birdscoffeecompany.com. So there we go. And thank you, Charles. Did you get your webcam taken care of?
Yeah, I did. The clip wasn't working earlier, and I was having a small freak out session, so had to get some tape and, you know, jerry rig it. Yeah.
Are you all good?
Oh yeah, no, it's much better. I was just afraid it was gonna, you know.
So patience being one of the issues that you had to overcome with publishing your book, Planewalker. Now getting into publishing, what have you learned that some of us may not be aware of?
Well,
especially when submitting to someone.
Yeah, I was going to say that, you know, one of my happiest moments, and this is going to tie into a very valuable lesson. One of my happiest moments was when I sent off Planewalker to Amazing Stories. I mean, you know, America's oldest science fiction magazine. I mean, they've been around since like the 1930s, you know, or before that. And they, you know, and they said they would review it. And that was really, you know, that was really awesome. I mean, I was excited, like I couldn't believe it. You know, it was so cool. I was like, man, you know, I've read these old magazines. Like I used to collect comics and, you know, stuff like that. So I'd like read them all the time. And it was just so cool, you know, and completely positive. And, you know, they didn't really like trash it, but you know, the main complaint that people have had in general is just that it has a slow start, which some people really like that because it just explodes at the end, you know, and they think it's, one reviewer said it's like a slow burning fuse of dynamite, you know. But that was one of the things that they said was that, you know, for the length of the book, which
it's 400 and it's quite lengthy, is it not?
Yeah, I think 450 pages, I believe. Yeah, it's a tome. But yeah, you know, they just said that the pacing, you know, was just not where it needed to be. And it was really difficult because world building, you have to really take time, you know, but at the same time, you don't want to drag on and distract the readers and have them, you know, not want to read it. But that was a really important lesson because you know, I don't want to say that you should go into submitting with low expectations, but I will say that you need to see every rejection or every bad review or everything like that as an opportunity to improve. You know, pride is the worst thing you can have in this business. You know, oh, well, they just don't understand my story. They just don't get it. They just don't this and that. You know, like that may be what you think, but you're marketing to the readers, not to yourself. You know.
And I absolutely understand. And just for example, the tale that you had published, that had been rejected and rewritten, resubmitted, rejected, rewritten, and resubmitted about 4 times before it was picked up. So, I mean, I believe that the changes that were made were necessary. And I am proud of the story that it is. But yeah.
Yeah, it's something, I will say this, and, you know, and this just made me think about that. If you have an editor, which I hope, you know, whoever's watching, if you don't have one, you need one. But, you know, if your editor goes halfway through the story and leaves a little comment and says that it should start here, I know that that's going to hurt because you're like, you know, these other 3,000 words. I mean, I put so much time into that. I put so much effort. Like, oh, I love this though. My advice is delete it and read it from there, and then read what it sounds like and how it flows, and read, you know, from that halfway point. Don't just ignore it. You know, if you really just feel like you can't accept it, you can always hit undo. But give it a shot. You know, if he says to cut it at page 10, and then you only have page 10 through 20, do it and just read that and then see how it feels. Because sometimes, you know, reading it from a certain point, you just kind of get a much better grip of, you know, the pace and all this other stuff. And even though that other information is interesting, it may not be necessary. And that's the thing, is that you have to be concise.
Spend all that time and energy building a scene when the action doesn't really start for a long time. Which can be quite a wasted effort.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, but that's, you know, the labor of love that's writing, you know. But I mean, I think that getting your, you know, the main reason everybody does writing, it's not for money. If you wanted money, you'd be in something different, you know. I think the main reason is that writers want to be heard. They want to be read. They want to have, you know, their minds picked. And, you know, it's better to get your mind picked than to have something you really love and never have it read by anybody but yourself and your editor. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes, like, sacrifices are very important.
Yes, very much so. Oh man, Now, while publishing Planewalker, we're going to move on to Gehenna and Hinnom with your experience that you've gained there. Other than an editor for your content that you submit, would you have any other advice for aspiring authors? What is the one thing that you have to unfortunately deal with the most that makes you immediately reject something?
Okay. I actually had a conversation with a writer, a few months ago about this. You have to understand, and I know how this may sound, coming from a publisher, but you have to understand that we are making an investment in you. That we are making the commitment to promote you, that we are making the commitment to pay you, and that we are believing in your vision. So, and I said this earlier, present yourself professionally. Because, if I read a story, no matter how, the editing is or the proofreading or anything like that, I always read at least to the halfway point. Even if there are glaring errors, I always read at least halfway. And most of the time I read the whole way through. But if there are glaring errors, you have to understand that, yeah, we have editors. But at the same time, if you submit a story that hasn't even been read through once, that shows us that you're not taking us seriously, and that you're not taking yourself seriously. And that's a very important thing for us is our time. And, a lot of these, a lot of stories that I've rejected have had good ideas. But, in the first sentence, there's a proofreading error. I mean, that, the idea is good, but like we have like a limited time scale. And, if we spent X amount of time on this story, it would take away from the time that we have to spend on the others. And, there's only so much time that we have. And, it wouldn't be fair for us to pour in, hours of time into this one story when, it was the author's responsibility to present it professionally in the first place. Because this is a business. And, I did, before I ever did publishing, I ran 3 or 4 online businesses. I sold comic books, I sold antique books, which I actually, after we did the interview with T.E. Grau, I actually sent him some old little collections. I sent him something with Ray Bradbury's little collection. I sent him something else that had like Ambrose Bierce, and it was like a Halloween, anthology from like the 50s. It was really cool. I have an embarrassing collection of old books, but that's
really a bad thing.
Yeah. But like I did all these other businesses. So going into this, and I think that's something that kind of like helped the company jump so far so fast, is that, I have a business mindset. And, we've heard from a lot of, different authors that always tell us that, we're very personable, that we always like, respond personally. We don't just copy and paste. We interact, we try to promote, like we always are about the authors, and we do care about the authors because as a businessman, I understand that my relationships are the only reason that the business is still kicking, and that the not necessarily customers, but, authors and, all these other people that we're involved with are the cogs in the machine, and that we need to help each other as much as possible because that's, the community. So, I mean, my biggest advice to authors, that are submitting any story, at least read through it once, and that's just kind of it kind of perturbs editors, when we see that, because it's like, we have to like print this or read this or whatever. And, I usually get like for the magazine, like up to 400 submissions every reading period, and so it's just kind of like, it takes a lot of time. So that would be my biggest advice, is to just polish, which I know everybody says that, but it's true.
Yes, and one thing that I have noticed, and I will say today that I haven't said before, read out loud.
Yes.
Read it out loud to somebody else. Read it in the mirror. If you're alone by yourself, just read it to yourself. And if there is a hitch in that rhythm, you'll learn to catch that
Yeah.
and go back and rewrite that sentence to where it flows. The syllables, the rhythm, the meter, if you want to get down to pedantic, so there you go. But yeah, the way that the syllables flow off the tongue, the way that you play with words.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I would say that probably the most important, part of this process is to have a second pair of eyes read it. I mean, the thing about the mind is that when you read over something so many times, even if there's an error there, you're not going to see it, because your brain's already kind of like subconsciously accepted that this thing exists, and it's just going to look over it. With Planewalker, I took me years to edit that thing. And, I sent it off to a few different editors and, all this other stuff. And it was the craziest thing because I would spend, 8 hours straight editing it, dicing paragraphs. Like I spent so much time on it. And then my editor would be like, hey, page 1, look at this. And it was like, what? Like I've gone through all 450 pages. I think that I went through the whole manuscript almost 100 times, and there were still things I didn't catch.
Oh, yeah.
So, always get a second pair of eyes.
Yeah.
Always.
I will echo that sentiment tenfold because I will do that even when I'm writing just reviews. It's gotten to the point with video game reviews where it's almost mechanical. I've got to generate that content, and still I will sit there and read it out loud to myself during the day. And even then, after I hit post, you go back and look, bam, there's an error.
Exactly.
You got to go back and fix it.
Yep.
But yeah. And let's see. I'm going to mix this up a little bit. Science. Well, I think I already know you're leaning here. One of my questions is science fiction or fantasy, and I think I know where you're going to go.
You might be surprised. Were you suspecting science fiction?
Yeah, I was.
I'm actually kind of weird when it comes to that. I love sci-fi, I really do. But as far as like something that's like hard science fiction, I definitely prefer sci-fi horror. But as far as world building, fantasy, any day. I mean, oh yeah, that's another thing I would tell the, we were talking about this earlier about the professors about, I tell them about Tolkien. Anyways,
I remember her name anyway. Her name is Cage Johnson.
Yeah. But anyways, I actually, I would tell professors this when, I actually wrote a few papers on this when the topic would come up about genre fiction. Dune, favorite novel of all time, but a lot of people confuse it. It's honestly not a science fiction.
It's space magic.
It's fantasy, That's the thing that people don't understand. And, they see Dune and they're like, oh, well, this is, I forget the amount of time. It's like 15,000 years in the future or something, and they think that, well, since in the future it has to be, sci-fi. But the thing about Dune and Frank, what Frank Herbert did with that book was that he ended the golden age of science fiction with Dune. Before that, you had, Asimov and Heinlein and all these other guys, that they're in the golden age of science fiction, hard science fiction, technology.
Yeah.
Dune. In all that entire series, even when his son and Kevin J. Anderson picked it up, they never go into the technology. It's not important because it's more about the mythical qualities. And Dune is a science fiction Dune is a fantasy in the same way that Star Wars is a fantasy. Another thing people don't, really understand. Because science fiction implies that it's fiction about science. And if you have this tech, but you don't ever explain what it is, it's the same thing as sorcery.
It's space magic.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, another great story about rejections. It'd be very inspirational. Frank Herbert, when he wrote Dune, he submitted that novel to hundreds and hundreds of publishers and got turned down every single time because they said that the language was too confusing, it was too long, people wouldn't want to read it, you know, and it was right at that golden age, you know, I think it was 1964 when it finally got published. And he edited it, he turned it into a page turner. If you haven't read this novel, read it, because it is indeed a page turner, even though it's so like big, it's impossible to put it down. But you know, he cut the paragraphs up, he cut the chapters into segments, into sections, you know, and he sent it off to Chilton, which was a cookbook.
Weren't they the car manual manufacturers, car manual publishers?
I thought they did cookbooks and how-tos.
How-tos for your car, like exploded drawings for. Oh, okay. Yeah, if you buy the manual for your classic car, it'll show you how to take the dash apart, it's exploded drawings, like this screw goes here, this is how you take the door panel off. And I know this because I've had a few of them in the past.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know where I read that they did cookbooks. I don't know.
They might have.
Yeah, they were nonfiction. You know, that was the big thing, is that they were nonfiction, and they accepted it, and then it became the best-selling science fiction novel of all time. You know, I mean, if that's not inspirational, I don't know what is. You know, and you know, at the end of the day, the most important thing is persevere. Persevere. Don't ever give up. Yes. If you love it, don't ever give up, because you don't want to be that old person looking back and thinking, man, you know, I really should have, you know, stuck with this, because it takes a lot of authors 5 to 10 years to become big. But when you get to a certain age, that's nothing, you know, and then you're looking back and like, wow, you know, five years is nothing. I could have, you know, I could have done it. And now you're, you know, stuck in this, this perpetual regret, you know, so I think perseverance is incredibly important. Don't ever give up.
Exactly. Because I mean, it's like I've wasted so much time already. You know, I always put writing into someday I'll get around to it. Someday I'll get around to it. And then through almost kismet, I suppose, I wrote something in one setting and in one sitting, sent it off. And of course, it got rejected. And then I wrote something else in another sitting, and it eventually was accepted. So, I mean, it's kind of odd. I feel maybe it's my age before I got started that led to the submission rate of being accepted. I've written 5 pieces, and 4 of them have been seen print in the world.
That's a good ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. What else were we talking about? We were talking about Dune.
Yeah,
Dune, and I love Dune, and I was going to actually ask another question about Dune, of whether it was Star Wars, Star Trek, or if you didn't like either one of those, Dune, which one do you prefer? And I think you answered that question already.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about like Star Wars or Star Trek, that age-old debate?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, definitely Star Wars, just because I like fantasy, you know. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, I grew up watching, you know, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, and, you know, Leonard Nimoy. Like, my parents are a lot older for my age. They're, you know, they had previous marriage, so, you know, whereas most people my age grew up watching, you know, honestly, I don't even know what, but probably movies from the 80s and stuff like that. I grew up watching Twilight Zone, you know, grew up watching Star Trek, the original, you know, stuff like that. Kolchak, the Night Stalker. If you haven't seen it,
I need to watch those.
So good. It's so cheesy, but it's so good. It's a direct inspiration to the X-Files.
Ah.
Yeah, you can definitely see it's like, you know, creature of the week kind of thing. But yeah, you know, like, and I enjoy Star Trek, but there's something about the fantasy element that's so interesting. It's this mystery, this mythic, you know, thing that, you know, this essence that you really can't understand, but that you can tap into, you know. And I mean, the Force is one of the coolest things ever invented. I'm sorry. It's just, it's so interesting, you know, and it does that thing that that fantasy and, you know, a lot of science fiction, a lot of you know, different stories do, and they kind of utilize this tactic, is they create this thing that anybody could be, you know, and that anybody could be the chosen one. Anybody could be this, you know, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all this other stuff, you know, the ring bearer, all, you know, whatever. And it creates that wonder in the children, you know, and the young people that are like, you know, well, that could be me one day. I could be, you know, connected to the force. I could be this, I could be that. And that's something that I really love about fiction that leans more towards fantasy.
Awesome. You know? Now, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Well, immortality.
Oh my goodness. And watch everybody you love die.
Yeah.
There will be others, I suppose, if you have eternity.
Yeah, no, I you know, it's the funniest thing. My beautiful girlfriend, Christina,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I tell her all the time, like, you know, I'm gonna live at least 250 years. This is a real thing. This is not a joke. I'm going to do it because, you know, they say that you know, people that are alive now, you know, the younger people, I guess, you know, in their 30s or 40s or, you know, and below, that these people are probably going to be able to choose when they want to die. You know, that they're going to be alive when that option becomes a thing. And I want to do it. I want to live 250 years at least. And you know, I told her that, and she was like, "Oh no, you know, I'm going to pass away, and da da da." And I was like, you know, well, you know, if that does happen, and you don't want to live 250 years with me, you know, I'll just create an AI, you know, that is you and your personality and all of your, you know, funny quirks, all the, you know, inside jokes, and then, you know, you'll be with me forever. And then I was like, that'd make a really good story about a really old man who's been alive for hundreds of years, and he created an AI of his long dead wife. I was like, that'd be really cool.
That would. It'd be kind of like Electric Grandma, but
Yeah.
but young girlfriend.
Yeah.
Electric Girlfriend.
Yeah, no, but immortality would be it. I don't want to be like Wolverine. I'd rather be like Legolas, you know, and just kind of perpetually, you know, live.
Okay.
Just because, you know, what was it that Russ Cole said? I don't know if you've seen True Detective, but it's really good. It's amazing. Yeah, he says life's really short, so you better be careful what you choose to get good at. You know, because he's talking about like he could have been a painter, you know, and he's like, well, why didn't you do it? And he says that, and that's true, and that's why I need to live 250 years, is because, you know, maybe the next 50 years, you know, I'll move from publishing to acting, and then from acting in the next 50 years to music, and, you know, it's just time. Need more time.
I have another one for you. You have the power to create one perfect movie or a TV adaptation of a video game story, and what game do you pick?
What video game?
Yeah.
I've always been a sucker for RPGs. As much as I would like to see a Halo movie or a Gears of War movie, Gears of War would be beautiful on screen.
Yes.
But I'm gonna have to go with Elder Scrolls. Like,
oh yes.
And if I had to choose one, probably Morrowind.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love Oblivion and Skyrim, but I just think that the world of you know, Morrowind was so much darker and bleak, and I loved it.
Yes.
You know.
Oh man, but what's the most gracious response to the why am I tongue-tied? What's the most gracious response to the rejections and setbacks that you have faced?
So the nicest thing somebody has said to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's something that honestly kind of like, you know, makes me tear up a little bit, is you know, especially towards the end of the year, I got a slew of emails from different authors. You know, one in particular was G.A. Miller. You know, he was the first person that ever submitted to Gehenna Hinnom, and he was the first acceptance. He had the story Earwax and the year's best body horror, and the most supportive and nice and just overall great person. And at the end of the year, he sent me a message, and he sent me a few before too, just saying how much he appreciates it. And I've I had another one where somebody told me that they had never dealt with a publisher like us before, just because we're so we try to be so personable. We're always personable. We try to respond fast. We try to if they need help with anything, we always do that. Like, we see authors as a commitment, not just like something to do. But honestly, the most gracious things have just been the people that have put faith into us and then had that faith rewarded, and just the constant people say that that they're really happy, and they want to see where the company goes, and that they're very thankful. One author that was in the Transhuman anthology said that he sent me a message on like January 1st and was like, I just wanted to thank you for how much you try to get the book out there and how much you try to promote us, how much work you're doing for us. And that's why I do it, is because of that. That's the only reason that keeps me going, because trust me, I don't want to read 400 submissions, and then in a limited window, and I only have about 15 days to do that. So because the response time is 30 days, so I want to have it out, all the responses out by the 15th of the following month. So like, I only have 15 days really to sit down and read all of that. And it's tiresome, it's stressful, but that's what I see as a reward for myself, is just helping these people get their voices out and get heard, and giving them these opportunities. It's just it's just nice to have them thankful for that.
Absolutely. What's the most agonizing career decision that you have ever had to make?
Well, most agonizing. I've had some pretty agonizing jobs. I've worked in, as a server. I've worked fast food. I've worked, I'm in hotels now, in hospitality, which I was doing that a few years back as well. Yeah, and I did retail too. I was an assistant general manager. That was the most agonizing situation on the planet. And towards the end of that job, the thing about this job was that it was really cliquey, and I'm especially down here in Mississippi, I am very strange, and when I tell people, they ask me like, what my beliefs are, and I tell them that, I think this reality is probably a projection or something like that. They're just kind of like, whoa, man, what's wrong with you? You don't believe in God? And I'm just like, I mean, I believe in something, and that kind of created a schism. And man, they did not like me, and they really tried to make my life hard. So that was the most.
Well, I mean, that in itself is they're digging a hole for you to step into.
Oh yeah.
At that point in time, and they know it too, because that's something you do not discuss at work, depending on where you work.
Yeah. No.
Speaking of, how did you make your first dollar?
My first dollar?
Yeah.
Like in general?
Sure.
Okay. I honestly don't know. Because I used to do like, chores around the neighborhood growing up, like mowing lawns and stuff. But my first real dollar, I guess I'll kind of go off on a limb and say like my first like real dollars that I was making was when I went to Seattle and lived and worked there for a while, because most of my family's in Washington State and Oregon, North Dakota. And, I worked in the Seattle Center right by the Space Needle.
Oh, wow.
And worked at a little ice skating rink and ran a concession stand there during the Christmas, New Year's time. And that was the first time that I like had, you know, I'll say real dollars, but, you know, of course,
Okay.
you know, it all went to the significant other, of course, but, you know.
Speaking of dollars, what's the first music album that you ever bought with your own money?
Let's see. I have about 200 in my truck, and I'm trying to think of which one was first. You know, in the age of digital music, it's really easy to just, you know, download stuff, which I did a lot in high school. But honestly, I'd have to say it was probably one of Linkin Park's first albums. Yeah, I don't know if we were connected on Facebook when Chester Bennington died,
No.
but that hit home, you know. And I was sharing everything I could about mental health awareness, you know, and I think that was probably the first, you know, album that I bought, because I think that I got that back when it first came out in like 99, 2000, something like that. Yeah. So that was a while ago, you
Yeah.
know, but they were actually a very science fiction-y band. You know, all their music videos were really science fiction. You know, they
Yes.
had like Gundams and stuff in the videos, and
Mhm.
they had an anime one for Breaking the Habits. You know, they were always very techno, you know, really interesting band. And, you know, that was a real shame about what happened to Chester Bennington. And that's something that, you know, needs to be addressed, unfortunately,
Yes,
is
it
mental
does.
health.
Now, I was going to ask another question, but now I'm not, because that falls too well into this rhythm. But what's one thing that you're exceptionally good at? I'm going to shift to a more positive gear.
I think that I have very good, I don't want to say sight. I guess I'm very good at reading situations. I'm very good at reading people too. You know, I used to spook people back when I was, you know, in early college and in high school, because, you know, I could look at them one time and know their whole life story. I'm actually incredibly good at that. Very good at reading in between the lines. You know, because, you know, I was diagnosed, you know, manic depressive when I was, you know, maybe 8 years old. You know, and so I've been on antidepressants for about 15 years, and, you know, I spent a large majority of my childhood in front of, you know, psychiatrists, and I think that it kind of sunk into my brain a little bit, you know, because like I'm very good at like seeing people's intentions, and knowing, you know, what they're really asking for when they ask for this, or, you know, knowing what they really mean by that. And you know, I think it's also why I don't come off as very personable, because I'm very direct and very honest. You know, but if I had to choose one thing, it'd probably be that.
What are you really bad at?
Really bad at pretty much anything with hand-eye coordination.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
like
get that. I totally
yeah,
get that.
I can get into a rhythm, and I can, you know, catch a football pretty decently. But as far as anything like a baseball, or anything like that, or anything that requires a lot of balance, you know, I did mixed martial arts for like 7 years. I
Mhm.
don't know if that really, I don't think that counts as hand-eye coordination, but you know, I was really good at that, but that was more of like grappling and actual like fighting. But as far as like catching and, you know, running and trying to catch something over my back, don't ever count on me for that. I
Oh,
will I will let you down.
oh. Now, how do you like to hit the reset button after a terrible day or experience?
Well, I I have this weird method of like handling things in the moment, you know. So like as far as like a reset button, I don't know if I really have one, because whenever I'm like having a bad day, or a bad situation comes up, or something that's stressful is happening, you know, I don't see it as a problem. Or I don't see it as, you know, an exterior force that I can't control. I see it as a problem that needs to be solved. So that's actually kind of my way of hitting the reset button, is just taking everything that's stressing, you know, everything that's bothering me, writing down a list, and then just handling it. Scratch it out, scratch it out, scratch it out. You know, I honestly don't really relax.
Yeah, I get that.
You know.
Yeah. Oh, let's see. What job, if you were offered it, would make you immediately drop everything that you're doing to say yes to?
Well, my whole driving purpose is to be able to work whenever I want to. So that's a difficult one, because the one job that I would really like is to not have a job, unless I want to. You know, that's what I think freedom is in this day and age. But as far as like a real job that that I would take in a heartbeat and without any, you know, questions asked, I'd probably say to be a publisher full time.
Okay.
You know, to just live and breathe and, you know, and help authors get out there. I think, you know, just, it makes me feel really, you know, proud and you know, content whenever, you know, we sign on authors and whenever we get their works out there, and you know, whenever, you know, we see on the charts that, you know, the ebooks are buying or they're being sold in the paperbacks. It just, what that means to me when I see a number like that is that, oh, there's another set of eyes. There's another set of eyes. There's stories that are getting read. There's stories that are getting read. You know, like I forget what her name was, but she was an editor over at Sci-Fi and Scary. You know, the website. Yeah, it's a really, you know, pretty high traffic website for like science fiction and horror and stuff. But I'll never forget it. And you know, this was another very gracious thing that I was told. You know, I sent her the press release for the transhuman anthology, and you know, I just told her about it and everything. And at the very bottom, you know, I put in this little PS thing. I said, you know, I said, if this is too short, if this is too long, if this doesn't have enough information, if this needs any edits, let me know what I can do. The only thing that I care about is getting the word out and giving these authors the exposure that they deserve. And, you know, that was like my little PS at the very bottom. And then she sent me an email and said, you know, she said, we don't actually do press releases anymore. And then she said, but this little tidbit at the very bottom of the message changed my mind. The part where you said that you want to get the authors whatever exposure you could and that you would do whatever it took. You know, and that was honestly like a good feeling, you know, because intentions are very important.
Absolutely. Now, let's go meta for a second. What question do you wish I would have asked you?
What question do I wish you would have asked me? Well, I can think of two. One of them would have to be about the birth of Gehenna Hinnom and how it came to be, because that is a very interesting story.
Tell me right now.
Okay. And the second one, just so I don't forget, would be to show these lovely books so people can
show me the books.
Okay.
And then tell me the story behind how they came to be.
This is the first magazine that we did. You know.
Oh yes, that's very pretty.
Yeah, and you know, I've been wanting to make, you know, to do a video about this. I just haven't really had the time. But when we design the interiors, I want these things to be unlike anything you've ever read. You know, we do have like interesting little illustrations in it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's like tentacles, you know. And let's get past the interview with Joshi. And then we have these little illustrations that kind of show like, you know, it has something that harkens to the story. And instead of the little star symbols to show passage in time, we have an elder sign.
Ooh.
Yeah. And then at the end of the stories, we have like a little bit more tentacles, because tentacles are always great. You can't go wrong with that.
Oh, yeah.
Have a very interesting, you know, format. This was the second one. This was the H.P. Lovecraft, you know,
That was the
anniversary.
extended edition, wasn't it?
Say it again?
That was the extended edition, wasn't it?
Yeah,
With
yeah, it
a
was a
little bit more content.
yeah. And I don't have the third one. I think the only copy I had, I sent it off for awards consideration. This is the one that just came out.
Yay!
This is,
I still need to get myself one of those.
yeah, we're sending out the contributors copies soon, but yeah, I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yay! Yes, I can.
Yeah, but and we also have like little illustrations in this one. For your and Peter's story, probably not going to be able to see it too well on this, but this is kind of what it looks like. And I got a picture of like a forest, you know.
Mhm.
I thought about there's one part in the story where he's talking about the clouds, you know, the type of clouds, and it's like I can't pronounce it.
Cumulus clouds.
Yeah, that. And I tried finding a good illustration of that, but I really couldn't. It just kept bringing up really weird stuff. And then,
well, it should.
this is the body horror anthology.
Yes.
Yeah. We were heavily inspired by Ellen Datlow's best, horror of the year, as you can tell by kind of the format.
Yes, I see echoes of it in there.
Yeah. And then at the beginning of each story, there's these little stitch symbols.
Mm-hmm.
Just make it kind of look like the book is stitched together. And then let me see, to show the passage of time, we have like more stitches.
Ooh.
But yeah, I mean, we just really want, like, I think physical presentation with books is very important. Every time that we have a cover or we're designing an interior, what I think about is I imagine myself picking it up in a store and I've never heard of it before. Would I pick this up? Would I buy it? Would I consider it? Like, that's what you got to ask yourself. And then this was the Transhuman anthology.
Yeah.
And this is the last one. But yeah, and then the beginning of each story has this little like techno, symbol. And then for the passage of time, it's got like this little circuitry. It's just cool little stuff to, make it look interesting. But yeah, no, the founding of Gehenna Hinnom is a interesting story. I could go into the whole what Gehenna and Hinnom are. Do you know what they are?
There is a valley where, oh gosh, it's outside of Jerusalem, and it's where the unholy were sacrificed. And Gehenna is where their spirits would go.
Yeah,
I'm not quite familiar with all of the story behind this. Yeah. Please enlighten
me. This is talking about this is always a touchy subject, because just because of personal beliefs, and especially for people that are into the Christian Judeo religion and everything. Because the thing about it is that I had this professor in college who taught Latin, and he taught Roman history and all these other things. He's actually a filmmaker, Miles Doliak. It was his film that we reviewed, Demons, which I think is on Amazon Prime streaming right now. But anyway, so he was the one that kind of like introduced me to this whole concept. I've always been a truth seeker. And he taught me that, what Gehenna was in the Valley of Hinnom and all this other stuff. It's actually a place in, as you were saying, like outside Jerusalem where, they constantly burned trash. It was no man's land. It was constantly fire, and they would bring out prisoners and convicts, rapists, whatever. They bring them out there, and they would starve to death. And, it was just like a real no man's land, to the T. And the interesting thing is that in the original Hebrew scriptures of, the Bible, of what, we see today as the Bible, in the original Hebrew translations, pre-King James Version, the word hell didn't exist. It was called Gehenna. You know, and the word hell and you know, lake of fire and all of that wasn't actually, you know, put into the Bible until the King James era, and when he decided that he wanted to make a universal, you know, translation, because people were starting to learn how to read, and there's all these different translations meaning different stuff, and when people learn how to read and they become educated, they become intelligent, you know, and then they become rebellious. So that was kind of his way of finding, you know, means to control the output, and you know, he created this universal version, and you know, there's videos everywhere. Like, people don't believe me when I say it, but there are videos everywhere, bishops and all these other people that will say that the concept of hell is a man-made creation, you know, that came around, you know, around the Dark Ages, and it was a means of control to an evolving society that was becoming literate, and that was very inspirational to me. Just that there was something that, especially here in the Bible Belt, something here that people take as the truth, you know, as this is, you know, this is the word, this is something that is just not questioned, it is understood as fact. But then if you take 10 minutes out of your day to research it, and you know, or talk to a theologian or talk to a historian, they'll tell you that it's bogus, you know. And that was kind of where, you know, I decided to get the title, was because I thought it was fascinating that such an interesting, unique story that could completely rewire our brains was literally right under our nose this entire time. And I thought the same thing about fiction and authors, you know, that all these great authors that could change your life with their stories are right under your nose the entire time, and you could have never even known it. You know, which is kind of ties to our focus on indie writers. We love indie authors. But the original Gehenna Publishing House was the name of the original company, and that's what the, you know, the email is tied to and everything. You know, that one kind of fell through just because you know, incarnation of it, that was back in 2016. It kind of fell through just because I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. You know, it was just so new, and yeah, there goes the camera again. But it was just such a new thing, and you know, I just had no idea like where to start and how to market and how to do all these other things. And it kind of took me for a loop, and you know, I disbanded it, and then back in April I restarted it. The funny thing is that I went through a really difficult time right before Planewalker came out. You know, and I was in between jobs, getting out of a really bad relationship, and you know, I actually wrote or edited and wrote most of Planewalker while I was homeless. It's a funny thing. Yeah, there's actually I did an interview on the Book Marketing Network about it. You know, and that when Planewalker came out, that was kind of like the thing that really made me want to, you know, tackle it, because I gained so much knowledge, you know, about publishing through that I wanted to utilize that knowledge to help other people that might be in similar circumstances. You know, but yeah, like before Planewalker got published and all that, you know, it was a really, really dark time. And, you know, then Gehenna Publishing House fell through and all this different stuff. And then, you know, we reopened the doors back in April of last year. So, and we, you know, retitled it, rebranded it Gehenna Hinnom. You know, but yeah, and that's another important lesson, is that, you know, if you're starting a business, it's bound to fail, you know, especially with your first go around.
Yeah. And that loops back around to what you had said earlier of never give up, and just keep on.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing. You know, I talked about it in the summation, and you know, T.E. Grau, Ted, he you know, he's just been really, really kind, and I mean, all the authors have been amazing. You know, and it was the funniest thing because like Planewalker came out, and then you know, it must have been about a year or so before I did Gehenna Hinnom. I was reading his collection, The Nameless Dark, and I was like, man, like, you know, I want to publish these short stories. Like, I want to like meet authors like this. Like, this is so cool. And then we did the interview with Joshi, and then you know, Hinnom 2 was coming out, and I was like, oh man, you know, like, you know, I like, tweeted out to him, and like Adam is a friend on Facebook, and I was like, oh man, you know, I'm gonna ask him. I was like so scared. I was, you know, because he was such a big inspiration for, you know, what I wanted the company to be, and you know, and he was just really cool about it and everything, and you know, I that's another really awesome thing, is just the people that you get to meet, you know. I mean, I would have never in a million years, when I was reading The Nameless Dark, you know, thought in my head, hey, you know, a year from now, you're going to be interviewing this guy and sending him some shabby old antique books. Like, you know, it was really cool.
That's very awesome. And again, I want to thank you for taking time to talk with me today here at Legends of Tabletop. I greatly, greatly appreciate it. And again, everyone listening, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a beat. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for your time. And I hope that you have an awesome, awesome next issue.
Definitely. Thank you.